Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the NBA Front Office Show. A ton going on around the NBA, but Keith, we got to start with the big news. Moon Knight is here. I have not watched. I
Moon
have not
Knight.
watched it yet. It came out pretty late, but man, I can't wait to get a peek at this one.
Yeah, Trevor knows now that it's out. I can say I've seen a little sneak peek
Hmm.
of it, and it's pretty good. But I'm excited to re-experience it a little later today when school is over and we can all settle in for a little bit. So I'm pretty psyched. So yeah, I woke up this morning and I was just kind of, hey, maybe you do the same thing. Like I wake up and I'm not ready to get out of bed, so I'm just kind of going through my
Hmm.
phone a little bit and seeing what's on there. And so I was like, oh, how's the reaction to Moon Knight? Like people seem to be loving it. I think they like the tonal shift. It's not the typical MCU product. So that seems pretty cool. So I'm excited.
Cool. I've tried to stay away from any kind of information about it or anything, so I just get a fresh take, clean slate. And so I'm excited. I can't wait to check that one out. That's definitely going to be happening later today. But I guess since this is the NBA Front Office Show, we should probably talk a little bit
Probably
about the
at least a
about
little.
the NBA, just a little bit. I guess let's start here. The MVP discussion. I mean, ESPN did another straw poll. It feels like we're right back where we were last year, essentially. Nikola Jokic has now taken the lead in ESPN's latest straw poll to win the MVP award this season. You've got Joel Embiid is right there as well. Giannis Antetokounmpo. What's your thought on this? Who's the MVP at this point? And I think when we talk about Jokic, we got to talk about how much do standings really matter in the MVP discussion.
No, that's a great point on the standings piece. Is what's tough too is much like it is for a lot of years, is people would say, well, the Nuggets are
Yeah.
six, they're on the borderline of maybe dropping into the play-in. Well, they are a grand total of a game and a half behind the Sixers. Just that's just the way the conferences work
Hmm.
sometimes, right? The Sixers are 46 and 29, the Nuggets are 45 and 31. And then Giannis has the best record of all at 47 and 28. It's funny because I've gone back and forth and back and forth. I don't think Giannis is gonna win. I'm gonna take him out of the
Same.
mix. I think people are gonna see it as, hey, we've been there, done
Voter
that.
fatigue.
He got his title, voter
Yeah.
fatigue. I think that could end up hurting Jokic too. I think there might be a sense of, hey, Embiid's been close a couple
Hmm.
times. Who knows how many more years he'll have at this level? Maybe this is the chance to get him one. If I remove the narrative stuff, I think I'd probably go with Jokic. Just when you start looking at the
It's
numbers, they're just
ridiculous.
insane.
Yeah.
In the defensive gap is not what it was. Even a year ago, he's really improved defensively. And then start looking at the rosters, it's not great. What he's playing with in Denver, considering Murray's been out the whole year and Porter Jr. has basically been out the whole year. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning, but I don't feel super strong about that pick either. I mean, it's just that close.
I mean, when you look at the number, like, my God, 26 points, 13.6 rebounds, 8 assists, 1.4 steals. How is he getting more steals than blocks as a big man? I don't understand that, but
He's sneaky on those like entry
he is.
passes. Like he's really good at poking those away, and he does a good job getting up to block lobs
Mhm.
too. Just getting the deflection and getting a finger on them. But yeah, it definitely is something
I
else.
mean, 58% for the field, 35% for three. Like those are just ridiculous numbers. But then again, like Joel Embiid has been tremendous too. I think the bottom, and maybe we end up at this point pretty much every year, but there's a few guys where if any of them won it, you would say, okay, yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
Yep.
I think if push comes to shove, I would lean Jokic, but just when you see he's sixth in the conference, his team is sixth in the conference, typically you don't see a six seed produce the MVP. That's usually
Yep.
it's one of the top tier teams. But I think when you factor in everything else, yeah, I probably do lean Jokic at the end of the day. Although I do have that, if I'm looking at my own bias, I don't appreciate the foul baiting stuff that we see from a couple of
Sure.
76ers players. So that might be coloring me against Embiid in some way because he's been fantastic as well. You really can't go wrong. I guess that's where I'm
No,
landing.
you really can't. I think the difference too is a lot of years we'd be all right. Who are we picking from the Suns?
Hmm.
Right? They've been kind of rampaging through the league. They're 61 and
Right.
14. Like, that's pretty absurd. I mean, once you start pushing up to the, low to mid 60s and wins, that's something. And we'll see. I mean, they've got literally nothing to play for the rest of the way. So maybe they start backing off and don't win
Uh-huh.
65 or more games. But we'll see with that. But I think what we have to look at there is, I think, so if I had to pick a top five
Yeah.
today in some order, I'll give it what I think my order would be right now. Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, Tatum, Booker. Flip flop Tatum and Booker if you
Hmm.
want. I have no issue there, and I feel comfortable putting Tatum in that list because outside of the Suns and the Grizzlies, and I'll get to the Grizzlies in a second, no one has separated themselves. All these other teams' records are basically the same. They're within a game or
Sure.
two of each other. Um, the Grizzlies, I'm going to take John Morant out of the mix, and I don't want this to get like overblown with the whole they're
Because
great
they've won
without
without.
him.
Is it that?
It's not that factors into
Hmm.
some extent because you do then what is the value? Now, I am on record, I've said it on this show, I've said it many other places. We're not overrating John Moran. We are underrating the rest of the
Yeah.
Grizzlies. Like that's the difference there. But you got to start to find tiebreakers when it's this close. And yeah, I think Booker and Tatum have been that good. I think they've both been big, great players. I mean, Tatum's, arguably outside of maybe, Giannis and Embiid, and I guess we got to put Jokic in there now. He's maybe the best two-way player in the league. His defense gets overlooked because of how good he is offensively. So yeah, I don't, but if it went Morant instead of Tatum or Morant instead of
Hmm.
Booker, I guess I just don't have a huge issue with it. I think this top group though, it's going to be one of those three, and I think it's more likely to be Jokic or Embiid.
I agree. I agree. And but I can't say that Giannis isn't deserving. I think when we look at the
Sure.
Suns, the problem for the Suns is that you could say, is it Devin Booker or is it Chris Paul? Right. I mean, but
Yep.
then it's also the Suns' brilliance this season has been that all of their pieces fit so perfectly. It's not just this
Yep.
one dominant season by a player.
Exactly.
It's been the
Mhm.
cumulative effect of everybody just pulling their weight and then some that's really created this situation for the Suns. Because I agree, in
Mhm.
most cases, if it was I don't know if it was Giannis and the Bucks are in the 1 seed and they're at 61 wins, then Giannis is the MVP, right? That's what we'd be looking at right
Yeah.
now. But the
Yep.
Suns, it's a little
Yeah.
bit, it's a different animal. Where does Luca fall in all of that? Because the
Yeah,
maps
and
have been
I
great.
should have had Luke in there. That was just a complete slip on my part. He should be right in that mix with the Morant, Tatum, Luca,
Okay.
Booker. Those two guys should be 4 and 5. Two of those
Yeah.
four should be 4 and 5. Curry, I took out with the Warriors slip. His play slipped a
Sure.
little, and the games missed. Durant games missed. Team is down in the play. And LeBron games
Teams in the
missed. Team
play-in.
isn't very
Yeah.
good. Knock him down there. DeRozan, the Bulls have slipped off enough that can knock him down. So yeah, but it is interesting. I want to know who, like, of this straw poll, because it's supposedly these are straw polls of like people who have
Yeah.
votes, I believe. Um, is like who gave John Moran a second vote? Like I can't see putting him over two of Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis.
Yeah.
Like that seems crazy to me. And then like who's given like Tatum and Morant and Booker third place votes? That Booker also get a second place vote? Like who how are those guys knocking out like ahead of one of those three? Because it's got to be Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis for me, top three. I don't even think it's a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I do wonder when you're looking at these straw polls, are the people that are voting in this, are they really sitting down and giving a really hard look at it, and
Sure.
or is this just okay, hey, this isn't official or anything, let's go with these guys, this makes sense, and then off you go. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some element of that. People get busy this time of year and all of that. So
Yeah. Well, and I think it's too, this isn't my real vote.
yes.
So yeah, this is what looks good. And then you hope when it's time to do the real thing, you're really putting in the time and effort and really, I mean, we've all listened to podcasts with people of actual
Uh-huh.
votes on these things, how they just, they it's misery
Agonize.
almost for them. Yeah, they're just struggling. I mean, Zach Lowe talks about it just about every
Hmm.
year. It's just like he's like it's between this and all NBA, I think the poor guy probably loses some hair and what he has left turns gray and everything else. Because I mean, you can tell it's just it beats him up to have to make these decisions. But you also feel good about it because he cares that much, and he's putting the
Sure.
work in to do it. So that's hopefully where most of the voters are
I'll
at.
I'll also say that that's part of the argument for why you see so many media members, and I fully agree with this, that don't want anything contractual tied to
Yeah.
MVP,
Yep.
All NBA, that kind of
Yep.
stuff. It,
Agreed.
it
Yeah. It's just, yeah, I know people who are like, man, we like cost Jason Tatum $30
uh
million last year. Like that's just how they think about it because now that was weird because of the voting. We could spend, an hour long show talking about how the positions versus
yeah,
positionless and all that stuff. But yeah, this is not as easy as it looks. Now, on the flip side, the guys, when they're voting more for like defensive player of the year, like, yeah, I added up blocks, steals, and defensive rebounds, and that's how I pick. Like,
yeah.
come on, we have tools that are publicly available and very easy to find. That you could just, even if you don't want to pay to go into the deep, dark corners of the internet where the stats live. Like you can find this stuff super easy now. Like it's that's when it gets
And
crazy.
NBA stats
That's when
live
it's
like on the dark web somewhere.
well, not NBA stats though, but I'm sure there's dark corners of the internet, man. It's where all these people live, right? Dark corner of their internet in their mom's basement.
We do need to talk at some point. We'll talk about the All NBA vote. We don't need to get into that today, but this is an interesting dynamic too. Mark Stein was talking about this the other day about how essentially like voters are going to have to collude in order to ensure
Yeah.
that Embiid and Jokic both end up in the top five, which on the first team, which they absolutely should be. But but again, that's maybe a bigger topic for another day. Let's get
And we'll do our full after
yes.
the season ends. We'll do our full awards picks. We'll go through all the major awards and all NBA and Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, all of that stuff. We will do that at the end of the season. Probably in that day when we're waiting for we'll analyze the play-in
Mhm.
matchups and then we'll get into that as we let that process play out.
Absolutely. All right, we've got an update on Robert Williams. Keith,
Raise hands to the
what's
air.
going on there?
Yeah, so Robert Williams, when it's a meniscus tear, there's a lot of different ways these meniscus tears can go. And the repairs, there's a rehab option, there's a repair option, and there's a removal option. The repair option is the one that generally takes you out for the longest period of time. It's usually about anywhere from an 8 to 12 week recovery on the short end, sometimes even longer. Robert Williams did have to have surgery. The Celtics confirmed that the other day. So it's not going to be a rehab or play through it situation. But the surgery he had sounds like it was either the trimming or the removal, which should have him back on the court sometime within the 4 to 6 weeks.
Mhm.
Now, Woj reported the 4 to 6 week timeline this morning, and then said in his report there's some optimism that it could be on the shorter end of that. Now, what leads me to believe he's getting that from a really reputable sources, the Celtics actual injury update press release says underwent successful surgery. Williams the third is expected to be able to return in approximately 4 to 6 weeks. So that matches that.
Right.
And the team's never going to say there's optimism he can return shorter because they're not going to put the pressure on that player
The Lakers do.
like that.
They
Yeah,
always
but
underestimate their injury,
yeah,
but that's another story.
but when you put a timeline instead of the return to play timeline will be discussed, as rehab or, the wording that y'all
Yeah.
use in these
Uh-huh.
pressers. When you actually put 4 to 6 weeks, that tells me, yeah, there may be some, thought that it could be closer to the 4 week mark. Now, let's start looking at calendars, right? We have a week and a half left in the regular season. We're about 2.5 weeks from the playoffs starting. So if it's 4 weeks or even 5 weeks, you're talking end of the first round, start of the second round
Mhm.
that Robert Williams could be back on the floor. And that is absolutely huge for the Celtics. They're the team we think they have become over the last few months. They should be able to get through the first round, even without Robert Williams. It's that second
Yep.
round and beyond when you're facing likely some one of the group of Milwaukee, Philadelphia, uh, Miami, maybe Chicago, maybe Toronto. Like that's where you start, maybe Brooklyn. you start to think, all right, well, that's when we need Robert Williams as the matchups get tougher. So, this is as good a possible news for Boston as you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And fantastic news for NBA fans, for basketball fans. I don't, I mean, obviously I'm obviously not a Celtics guy or anything like that, but I don't care whether a Celtic, a Clipper, whatever. I want guys healthy on the floor and be able to
Yeah.
see some high quality basketball. So this is
Yeah.
fantastic news. And especially coming into, I'm so fired up for the playoffs. You want to see teams at their best come playoff time. So that's great news for Robert Williams. Unfortunately, some bad news for the Denver Nuggets. Michael Porter Jr. suffers a setback. Now, he's not shut down for the season. What they said, I believe we talked about this yesterday, about how sometimes when you are managing an injury, it can lead to other stuff. And that kind of sounds like what's going on here. The setback stemmed from overcompensation and overwork amid his rehab. So that's where you're compensating for an injury. You can expose yourself in other areas to injury. And so that's not great. Again, not shut down yet for the season, but we were hoping to see a close to full strength Denver Nuggets team come playoff time. Doesn't sound like that's going to be happening.
Yeah, this report came from Mike Singer, who's been all over this stuff the whole way. And he also said that there's now some thought that Jamal Murray may have jumped Porter in the return to
Mm.
play. And it was starting to sound like we weren't going to see Jamal Murray this year. So again, just you got to start looking at calendars now. We're talking it's basically the end of March, beginning of April. We may be down to it on getting Michael Porter Jr. or Jamal Murray back on the court this season. I'm starting to think the Nuggets may say, hey, we're going to run with what we have, and so be it. Now, this could be one of those things where, you know what, we're in the second round, or we made it to the conference finals. Hey, 10 minutes a night for each guy
Yeah.
off the bench. Let's go. And then maybe that's where we go. But yeah, it's going to be tough sledding for the Nuggets. We're going to do a full standings breakdown for each conference in a couple minutes. But they're right in the mix, with a ton of teams, which we'll get into here in a second.
Paul George returned last night for the Clippers, and my gosh, what were they down? 24, 25?
24, 25.
Something like that. The Clippers again came back. And against
Did you see the stat on that?
Uh-uh.
There's been 7, I believe it's either 24 or 25 point comebacks this year in the NBA, and the Clippers have done it 4 times out of the 7.
I was going to say, I know they've done this a few times already this season. They came back against the Utah Jazz. Utah, of course, not thrilled with that. And some bad memories there. So the Jazz now, 5-game losing streak for the Utah Jazz.
Let's come back to the Jazz in a minute, because let's talk Clippers.
So
Paul George, not only did he come back, but he was awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was absolutely dominant. Played 30 minutes, too. I don't know what his minute restriction was supposed to be, but 30 in a first game back seems pretty high. Absolutely. Generally, you're talking 20 to 25 minutes, and then we ramp up. But, that might have been one where he was like, hey, I feel good. And let's remember, too, it was an elbow injury. So, provided they could brace everything correctly, he should have been able to keep his conditioning up with running and those kind of things. So, I'm sure he's not as far off as, maybe somebody who had a lower body injury would have been. But he was great. They played good, and they kind of did the same thing they did to the Jazz in the playoffs. It was, all right, we're going to go super small, and we're going to spread you out, and we're going to, and it's tough because I feel like that unfairly gets pinned on Rudy Gobert. And it's not, they play 5, it's everybody. If a team can successfully play 5 out, yet still drive the ball, that's really hard for any defense to deal with. Never mind, if it's Gobert, because it's not like they're isolating Gobert the whole game and attacking him off the dribble. Like, that's not what's happening. It's just they go small, they go to that 5 out, and that's what they did. Now, flipping over to the Jazz, as you mentioned, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were not very happy afterwards. Basically said, hey, it's the same thing. Last year, a lot of, it's the same thing every year, with us. I put this on Twitter this morning after I watched that game, and I said, it feels like the Jazz every year, there's a good team that gets broken up just because it's like, it's time. We've gone as far as we can go. Feels like the Jazz are that
they
team
could be
this year. It just, I mean, how much further are you going to continue to run with the same group, with the same coach and everything? And I don't know that this is necessarily a split up Mitchell and Gobert and trade either one of them, but I think this might be a let's change everything around those two
Yeah,
situation.
I mean, you could certainly look at the Portland Trailblazers as a team that probably should have broken things up sooner,
Yeah,
and kind of as a cautionary tale for what can happen. So I think you're right.
yeah,
I don't think you necessarily move Gobert or Mitchell, but maybe there's a change with the head coach. There's already been rumblings around Quinn Snyder. Some of the pieces
hmm
around them may move, but yeah, if the Jazz do the same thing again, where they're a solid regular season team, get to the playoffs, teams lock in on them, figure out exactly what they're doing, and then they go home, I would have to think there's going to be changes coming this offseason,
yeah,
because it's very clearly at
yeah.
that point, it's been proven that this isn't going to work to get them where they want to go.
Well, and just the two, like you said, solid regular season team. We've already seen, like you mentioned, five
Yep.
game losing streak. They've slipped now to fifth in the West. They're actually tied with Denver, only 2 games up on Minnesota. So it's not out of the realm of possibility they fall all the way into the play in. I don't think they will. But you never know. And they're as close to the play in as they are to catching
Hmm.
Denver for fourth in home court. They're three behind Golden State, who they've been no ball of fire recently either. They've lost three in a row too. But I think the thing you have to look at with the Jazz is whatever happens this year is what it is. But then look at next
Hmm.
year. Clippers are almost assuredly going to be much
Yeah.
better. Minnesota looks like they're not going away. The Pelicans are playing pretty well, and they're probably going to get Zion back, and then have a full year of CJ McCollum. I know it probably seems like it's, might as well be talking about flying to the moon here, but I believe the Lakers will be far better next season than they are this season. And then Portland's talking about, hey, we're going to flip this thing real quick. I mean, you start looking behind the teams behind you, never mind the teams ahead of
Hmm.
you, and immediately, tied with you. And all of a sudden it's like, man, we got to figure this out. Or we might be looking at a string of, 44 win seasons coming up here where we're fighting to stay out of the play-in
Right.
tournament.
Right. And that's something they got to look at. By the way, you meant Dallas at the 4 seed and not Denver. But
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
no.
you're correct, Dallas.
But
Yep.
but yeah, this is we'll see. We'll see what winds up happening here with the Utah Jazz this offseason. It could be a busy offseason for them, particularly with Danny Ainge involved now. So we'll see.
Yeah, and well, that's the other thing. I'm glad you called that out because he'll pull the
Uh-huh.
trigger. I mean, I know it's become the
He'll
joke
come
of
very
almost and
close.
all that,
Yes.
but yeah, but that's I think Danny Ainge likes nothing more than a
Hmm.
teardown and a restart. I think he relishes that opportunity. I think he would love to do that, and that often comes with, I'm going to hire my own
Yep.
coach, and I'm going to pick a coach to my guy to lead that. So yeah, they're very very interested to see what happens. And I mean, hey, I'm not going to rule it out. Maybe they go on a little run here in the playoffs, and this all becomes a moot
Sure.
point later. But right now, it doesn't look like it.
Brandon Knight gets a 10-day with the Mavs on a hardship deal.
Yep.
So
Trey Burke and health and safety
correct.
protocols, which is what opened that
Yep.
up.
We do need to get to the Knicks though. Julius Randle really acting like he might want to be out of New York, might want to trade. What are your thoughts on that? On the Knicks potentially moving on from Randle this offseason? Does it feel like, I mean, he didn't have as good of a season, obviously, this season as last season, but it felt like he also got a lot of the blame too, for what happened
Yeah.
with the Knicks this season. So do they move on from Randle this summer?
I mean, my initial thought is, Trevor, get off the trade machine and stop dreaming up Westbrook for Randall
I was
trades.
I
That's
was
probably I don't.
literally asked that last night on our post game live show. People said, "What can you do? Can something be worked out of Randall for Russell Westbrook?" So I literally had to talk about that last night.
I mean, crazier things have
Sure.
happened, right? I mean, if I think a lot depends on what the Knicks are looking at. The Knicks set this up with their contracts for this to really be kind of a 2-ish year
Uh,
window, because they can do a lot of pretty quick reset here after next season. And that would fit if that's where you were going to go. If you wanted to, let's say you were like, well, we also want to clear out
yeah.
Fournier's deal. We want to get rid of, maybe Nerlens Noel or something. Then maybe what you could see is Randall, Fournier, Noel for Westbrook. And, maybe that's the
Right.
way it goes. Get a pick or two out of it too and go. So it's not the craziest thing. Right. To think that I tend to think, no, that's how,
Yeah, and
I
that's
don't
what
think
we're
that's
hearing
how
too, is
it'll
that the
go.
Knicks are not in on a
Yeah.
Westbrook move, and I don't think they necessarily should be. But
Yeah. But I mean, it's also March
Yeah.
30th. It's not, not June 30th. So, I mean, and let's face it, nobody thought Westbrook was going to the
Uh-huh.
Lakers this time, a year ago either. But just for Randall himself, I do wonder if they're looking at it and saying, man, that's a little bit of buyer's
Yeah.
remorse. They gave him that extension that kicks in next season. That's a 4-year contract that runs out for $117 million.
And a player option.
Does have a player
Yeah.
option on the end. You might have already seen his best year,
Mm-hmm.
which was last year, when he was legitimately great. And this year's just been tough. Now, I think the bigger question, like you said, is can you put all that on him? Like, I don't know that that's fair,
Sure.
right? To put all that. Sorry, the dogs
No, you're
are
fine.
playing with a toy. You can't put all that on him, but you have to really ask some difficult questions if you're the Knicks, because we thought we were adding to this. I tend to think what they did was they took, in an attempt to improve their offense, they took what made them special, which was their defense, and they lowered it too
Mm-hmm.
much. And then that turned into the offense isn't that good. They didn't improve it by that
Lakers
much.
East, essentially. In
A
a
little bit, yeah.
different way of going about it, but
Yeah, and
similar
minus
concept in terms of, okay, we're going to help the offense. Any defensive issues that we incur as a result, we're going to be able to manage those things.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
basic idea.
Yeah, completely agree. Yep. So, all right, we want to use that. Let's, since we're on the
Yeah.
East, you want to look at the East standings real
Sure.
quick. So speaking of the Knicks, they're hanging in to whatever
11th seed.
string or edge of the cliff, however we want to talk about it. 4.5 games behind, so it's really just a matter of another day or two, and they're probably going to be eliminated from the playoff race. They have won 4 in a row, so they're going down swinging at least.
Sure.
They're not quitting on this like some other teams. Which is funny. Have you noticed? I know you're on Twitter quite a bit, like I am. Pelicans fans are also have turned into massive Knicks and Wizards fans, because they're hoping that they can continue to push the Lakers behind them in the standings, if so be it. So that's just always a fun subplot of, hey, we own this other team's pick, so this team we generally do not care about. We are big fans of them. But for the good stuff, the East is really split into tiers now for me. There's a top 4: Miami, Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly. That's the order right now, but it's a game and a half that separates Miami from Philly. So, I mean, it's really anything to play for. Boston and Miami play tonight. I think Boston still has a game with Milwaukee left. I think there's one other game between those two teams left. So there's still a lot to be decided there. Then Chicago, Toronto, Cleveland is in kind of that next group for the 5, 6, 7. 1.5 separates Chicago to Cleveland. Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Atlanta, the 8, 9, 10. They're a game and a half separating them. I'm not going to rule it out that Brooklyn could maybe catch Cleveland. I mean, God, Cleveland loses another player.
Yeah, at this point.
That's, then who knows what happens with them. But so maybe Brooklyn catches them. I tend to think not. I think Cleveland will probably hold off. They're up 3 in the loss column, but it's definitely getting a little tighter. But that's kind of your East, playing or your East playoff and play-in picture there. That's kind of the ordering that we're looking at there, and that's still pretty big. And it's that Toronto, where they fall, starting to become a question for. We know Kyrie can't play in Toronto, so if it's Toronto and Brooklyn in that play-in, and then there's some question about the Celtics guys out there. And I know people have been screaming and yelling, but they played there in November. Canada changed the rules on January 1st. I believe it was. So you can't go off if they played there in November. Now, Ime Udoka did say, we have no reason to believe anything different, that if healthy, all of their players can play games in Canada. They just did not the other night because Brown and Tatum were dealing with some knee soreness and Horford was out for personal reasons. So, but yeah, that's a factor that needs to be considered, at least if you're going to be facing the Raptors, whether it be in the play-in or in the first round of the playoffs.
That's a factor. I wonder if we're going to see any shenanigans with the 2 seed as well. Because at this point, with how many injuries the Cavs have suffered, assuming Brooklyn holds on to the 8, then we can probably think that Brooklyn wins the first round of the play-in. Then you've got a first round matchup with the Nets that now have Kyrie. I would think teams that wouldn't be ideal for teams.
I can't tell you how many fans from Boston, Miami, Milwaukee, and Philly have been like, just give me 3 or 4. Like I rather 3 or 4. I'll go on the road in the second round. Just give me 3 or 4, and I can avoid, playing
Yep.
Brooklyn definitely in the first round. So yeah. I mean that's tough. Now I kind of look at it as they just struggled to beat the
Yeah.
Pistons. They've lost to some other good team. I don't. It's not. Yeah, you'd rather probably not play them just because of the KD
Right.
Kyrie factor. I mean, they can win games almost by themselves. But I don't know. I think in the end, you just got to let it play out because you don't even know, right? I mean, what if Brooklyn looks at it and says, "Hey, we don't like who's in the 2 seed. What if it's Milwaukee?" And they're like, "We don't want to deal with
Yeah.
that." So they tank that first playing game because they feel good about winning the second one. Now that's risky,
Sure.
right? Because then
Absolutely.
you're going to get potentially the Hawks or the Hornets who could shoot the lights out and shoot you out of it. But yeah, I also think too the East playing games are going to be really fun.
Oh yeah.
I mean, those are 4 teams that are going to be pretty good teams, probably teams that are 500 if not better records this year. So you're not even looking at it where I felt like last year was like, all right, get this 9-10 one over so we can see who's going to get demolished in the by the loser of 7-8. But I don't feel like it's necessarily that way this year. They're going to be kind of must watch.
Get rid of standings. Let the high seed, or get rid of the bracket and let the higher seed pick their playoff opponents. Let's just do that.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
I'm in on
That'd
that.
be all the
I
drama.
I I mean, and then imagine, God, we'd have content
Oh
for
yeah.
days because it'd be like, right? And I mean, imagine those lower seeded teams too. Hey, you wanted
You
this.
called
Now,
us
now
out
you
here.
got it.
Careful what you wish for. All that.
And then it would be funny if it's like because you'd get that before the series, and then the team like blitzes them by like
Yeah.
40, and then it's like, oh yeah, I guess that's
Well,
why they picked
that's
us.
why. Jumping
Yeah.
over to the West, it's pretty clear. I mean, the Phoenix Suns, they're in a tier by themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
61-14. Then you've got another tier that's another solo. It's just the Memphis Grizzlies that are 8.5
Hmm.
games back. I mean, that discrepancy is crazy, but 8.5 games
Yeah,
back.
and they're almost there for clinching too.
Yep,
I mean, that's just a matter of
that's going to
days.
happen. And then the Warriors right now are barely hanging on. They're a game ahead of the Mavs. The Mavs could, in theory, catch them. Particularly, I mean, the
Sure.
Warriors have lost their last 3 in a row. So you've got them.
Yep.
I tend to look at it as when I'm thinking playoffs, I think you've got 3 distinct tiers. Now, Steph Curry back, maybe you can put Golden State and Memphis in the same tier. But without him, I think it really is Phoenix, Memphis, and then Golden State maybe in their own tier if Curry's back. We'll see.
Yeah, if Curry's back,
But
yes. If he's not,
right.
then
And
yeah.
then you've got a grouping where it's the Mavs, the Jazz, the Nuggets. You can order them in some way, make arguments for all of them. I think the Mavs right now are playing the best basketball out of that group and from a
Mhm.
health perspective as well. So I think that's pretty fine when you're looking at the way things are lining up currently. And then Minnesota has separated themselves from that kind of
Yeah.
play-in group to where they're also kind of in that mix with like I don't know in a T Wolves Jazz series. Like that's a tough series to call for me, even though they're separated by a couple spots in the standings.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that we'll get it,
No.
right? Because I mean, but yeah, I'm not Minnesota's
Yeah.
tough. When you have Cat and Edwards and I think it almost kind of sometimes gets forgotten. Like D'Angelo Russell's a guy who could
Uh-huh.
throw up a 40-point game. They actually do play defense pretty well. So yeah, it's definitely there. And then behind them, right, the Clippers, they're not going to catch
Yeah.
Minnesota. So and no one's going to catch the Clippers either. So Clippers in 8. So we're going to get it's just the question is do the Jazz or Nuggets at this point fall far enough from Minnesota to
Right.
catch them? I tend to think probably no. But I mean, the Jazz are playing terrible right now, so maybe that happens. And then it's Pelicans, Spurs, Lakers for the final, the 9, 10, 11
Yep.
spots. So they're all within a game of each other. So I mean, I not to air our dirty laundry here, but I was kind of like, where are we at with this? And I feel better because you're like, oh, we talked about
Oh
it
yeah,
on
yeah.
Lakers Nation.
Like do
So
the Lakers
I
even want to
yeah,
make the play in
yeah.
is the question.
So I'm going to ask you two
Yeah.
questions then. The first one is where are you at with it? So you tell me, and then I'm going to make more of a statement.
Okay.
And I want
So
those thoughts
here's been there's and this has been definitely part of the discourse on Lakers Nation has been what do we want the Lakers to even make the play in? Because there's 2 sides to this. There's the yes, you should play hard all the way through, do everything that you can to win, even if it looks like it's just a lost season, which I think it certainly is. Um, do you still continue playing hard, or do you say that's it? We'd rather not make the play in, put us out of our misery, get these guys off the screen, get the jerseys off of these players, uh, wipe the deck clean, and start fresh July 1st. I don't mean trading LeBron or AD or whatever that kind of stuff, but
Yeah. No,
just
I
fast
get
forward to July 1st and let's just get this done with sooner rather than later.
you. This is where I'll check in and say my snarky response was July 1st, 2023, you mean? That was
I
my
saw
snarky
that,
response.
but that's the flip side to it. Now I've seen the sentiment also bottom this thing out, make it as painful as possible so that there's no chance that the front office can look at this and say, well, if you guys were hurt, let's not change too much. Like,
Yeah.
make sure this thing is burning to finish it out so that they have to do something. So they're forced into action. I think there's going to be activity regardless. I'm not worried about that. So I fall on the side of I would rather see them make a push and then do what they can to win games, because I think you should just play hard all the way through, do everything you can to win up until the point when you go home.
So I'm gonna give you my thought, and then I have something
Yeah.
else. So my thought is, I'm in agreement with you. As long as you're not risking further long-term
Yes.
damage to LeBron or
Injury.
AD or anybody else who's dealing with anything, then yeah, push, because one, you don't have your pick, so it doesn't
Yep.
matter. If you had your pick, I'd feel very differently
Agree.
about this, right?
Exact
That'd be a
same.
whole different, yeah, it'd be a whole different scenario. And then you're like, all right, well, if you got your pick, then maybe I can
Yep.
understand, so bottom it out and make the front. I think the front office knows it's pretty bad. I think
Yeah.
barring a, first round series win, maybe a second round series win, maybe even a close West Finals. I think the front office is like, yeah, there's no
Right.
salvaging this group as it is. So that part I can't fully understand. There's no, to me, that's kind of, a slap in the face to everybody, just saying don't even play the rest of the way. So yeah, so that I'm with you. Play it out, because you
Hmm.
never. I mean, maybe you get in the playoffs and something
Sure.
happens, right? You never know. I mean, I always think back to, remember that year when it looked like the Bulls were just going to roll Philly, and then unfortunately Derrick Rose got hurt, and Philly won that series.
Was that
And
the
it's
Rondo year too? No, well, there was a
maybe.
year that Rondo was really good for the Bulls,
Oh,
and then
Rondo went with the
yeah.
Bulls against the
Oh, that's right. I
Celtics.
was against the
They were up
Celtics,
2-0
and
and
the Bulls
Rondo
were
got
cruising
hurt.
with
Yeah,
Rondo, and then
yeah.
Rondo got hurt. Yeah, but
Mhm. Yeah, and then they lost four
right.
in a row. But yeah, I always think of that. It was that first round. It was that one of those really, really good Bulls teams. They were the
Hmm.
number one overall seed, and yeah, and then Derrick Rose went
Yeah.
down, and Philly ended up upsetting them, and that kind of changed the whole
Sure.
tenor of that playoffs. But yeah, so I mean, you never know. Now, here's the kind of statement I
Yeah.
wanted to make is, I don't think they look like they care very much about what
Hmm.
happens. And that's the thing for me, is it watching that game last night, other than a couple of guys, it didn't look like anybody really gave a crap for 90% of it. Then you had some of the bench guys get in there and get
Yeah.
after it,
They're playing for their
kind
NBA
of,
careers for some of these guys. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they're kind of showing, hey, I still have
Yep.
something. Let's get this on tape for free agency in a few months. But that's just my thought, as I looked at that.
That's, they were asked about that last night in the post game presser, and like Stanley Johnson said, no, we signed a contract to play with the Lakers. We said we would play hard all the way through. Well, that's what we're doing and all that. But they've that's been a theme all season, is they've said the right things off the court, but then it hasn't translated on the court. You can kind of see they're a team that all season long has had this mentality of, if they get punched, they don't fire back. They just go, "Oh, okay, never mind. Nope, you guys take this one.
Yeah.
We'll all right, on to the next one. No big deal."
Mm.
That's been their mentality.
No big deal until we've had 40 of
Yes,
these.
yeah, but that's
That
literally
turns it's kind of a big
from day
deal.
one. They've been the team that does
Sure.
not punch back. If they get hit,
Yeah.
they do what Lakers fans know is the fake comeback. Well, they will
Yep.
get themselves just close enough to kind of make you think, oh, maybe they could, and then no, then they collapse again. So yeah, that's part of that's just human nature, right? When teams are just raining
Yeah.
threes on you, and it's hard to continue going 100 miles an hour the entire game, but still there is a baseline competitive balance that you have to have, or you've got to have the ability to go out there and compete on a night in, night out basis, even if you know that you're probably not going to get the win. Like it looked like they went into last night's game saying, well, LeBron's not playing, so start the clock. Let's get through this thing.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah. So I'm there,
Hmm.
right? Like yeah, that's where it is. But there it is. There's your East and West playoff
Yep.
rundown. We'll probably I don't know. We'll do it. It's this in depth every day, but as it changes, we'll get into it because we're obviously going to see. I mean, Boston, perfect example. Win Sunday, they go into Monday's game in first place. They lost Monday and they dropped to fourth. They didn't even play
Hmm.
yesterday. They move up to third. Like that's just how tight some of these races are. So you're going to see teams bouncing up and down the standings here. With one
Hmm.
game can be a huge swing. I mean that's Celtics and Miami playing today. Could be a big swing. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Yep.
Absolutely.
All
All
right.
right. I think that's it
I think
for
that does it.
today.
Yeah.
We got through another show. Everybody, we appreciate all the ratings, the reviews we've been getting over on Apple Podcasts. We're
Yeah, those are huge, guys. Thank you so
absolutely,
much.
they're big help. We are absolutely going to read some of those too this week. So that's going to be coming, and all of you who are subscribing over on YouTube, getting going in the comments section, appreciate all of you as well. Make sure you are turning on those notifications. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.